Hey Kim, I'm going to take a series of videos to show you how to put the pump boxes together. Here goes. The first thing you're going to probably want to do is mount the tube holding tab, which goes in the slot at the bottom. That's this thing right here, and it's pretty straightforward. It just goes in like that, and then you're going to put two 440 half-inch screws in the bottom there. We're going to be sending you the screws with the pumps. Okay, and once you have the tube mounting tab in there, held using the 440 screws in the bottom, you're going to move on to the compression fitting, and that's here. You'll notice it has a fixed nut on the bottom. That goes on the bottom of the enclosure. The threaded nut goes on top. Alright, so I have the compression fitting in there now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a piece of 1/4-inch tube and just stick that in the top and lock it down. And both sides are done identically. Okay, the next thing you're probably going to want to do is mount the pump motor. And here's the pump motor. You actually already have the barrel jack leads soldered to it, but this is pretty straightforward. It goes in from the back side, and there are two little black 440 screws that I've sent you that you use to secure it. It should thread right in there, and all you got to do when you attach it is just make sure that the motor is kind of sitting center in that hole, and then you can just tighten it down. Okay, and since you just did the pump motor, since the barrel jack is already soldered to it, it makes sense to do that next. It's pretty self-explanatory. Goes in the bottom in there like that, and then you're going to use a 228 self-tapping screw to secure it. Alright, so the next part's the shitty part, so I'm just going to recap real quick what we did. We put in the tube holding tab. It's held using the two 440 half-inch screws with the Allen key on top. We put in the compression fitting. Remember that fixed nut goes on the bottom, the threaded nut goes on top. You tighten that down with the 16mm wrench. We put a little tube in the top there, tighten that down, and then we put in the motor, which goes in on the back side. And you can see I used the two black 440 screws to attach that. And again, the only thing you need to pay attention to really is just that the motor is tight and that the shaft is more or less centered in that hole. And you can move on to the next part, which is mounting the pump head. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to prep the pumps for installation, and really all you have to do is you take this back plate off. It's basically just held on with dowels. There's no screws or anything. So just kind of pry it off. This yellow piece that holds the rollers in place, this comes off too. You can just set that aside. And here's the inside of the pump, and I'm sorry my camera's a piece of shit. Oh, there it goes. Basically what you're going to do is you're just going to cram Vaseline into these areas just to keep it lubed up nice. And then when you're finished, you can basically just replace all the parts. It goes together very easily. Just put it all back together, make sure it snaps all back together, and you should be good to go. Okay, so once you get that pump back together, you can actually put it onto the enclosure, and that shaft is keyed. So you just basically, spin the pump till it goes on the shaft, and it should just kind of drop into place. Okay, now here's the shittiest part of the whole assembly. The first thing we have to do is we have to cut these neoprene lines to length. And basically what we're doing here is you want this black neoprene line to more or less be just past the length of the top of this compression fitting here. And what you're ultimately going to do is you're going to take this black neoprene line and slip it over this tube. So the idea is you want the neoprene line to end more or less right here, without it being under tension or compression. You want it to be just the right length, and it's going to take a little trial and error to get that procedure down. But once you do cut this to length, to slide it over this, what I usually do is I'll turn the pump to the side like this. I'll take a heat gun and I'll aim it right at the ends of those neoprene lines to kind of get them warm and soft. And I'll put just a little bit of Vaseline. I'll kind of spread it thinly along the outside of this plastic tube here. And then once I'm ready, I'll spin this around. And then I'm just going to basically slide this black neoprene line over this plastic tube. And then once that's done on both sides for both compression fittings and both neoprene lines, we can move on to the hardware that actually holds this down. Okay, and so once you have the neoprene line slid over this plastic tube done for both sides, we're going to screw this down, and we're going to use the pump hardware. There's like these flat rubber washer spacers or whatever, and these 2 long screws. What I usually do is I'll take one of these guys. I'll just pull the pump off a little bit off the surface of the box, and then I'll just kind of like slide one of those rubber washers into place, and then put the pump down. Take a screw, put a dab of permanent red Loctite on the end of this. That's very important. These screws will back out otherwise. So you put a dab of red Loctite on it, and then basically screw it down. And the amount you're going to like torque down the screw is important, because you want this pump head to kind of like rotate a little bit as the motor turns. So what I usually do is I'll put a reasonable amount of pressure on the pump head, and at the same time I'll use a screwdriver to tighten this down, and then I'll just watch and I'll wait for the bottom of the screw head to just make contact with the top surface of this pump head, and you can maybe turn it like another quarter turn, and then it's tight. And then when you're done, just kind of give the pump a little twist, and just make sure it has some play in it, that it does have some ability to move around a little bit, and that should be good. Okay, so the very last step, after you get the screws in there, you've got the little rubber washers in there at the bottom, and once you slide the neoprene tube over this clear tube, the last thing you have to do is just take one of the black zip ties we've given you and zip tie each tube, and you're just making sure that this neoprene line isn't going to pull off of this clear tube, and also just to seal it so there's no air gaps or anything. Once you put the 2 zip ties on either side, that should be ready to rock and roll. You can start testing it and make sure that it sucks up fluid okay and there are no leaks.